After a man went missing in Pennsylvania, what police discovered was traumatizing. David Hittinger was a 37-year-old man living in Pennsylvania. His friend contacted police earlier this month after becoming concerned for his welfare. He was reported missing after having not been seen in an unusual amount of time. It had apparently been his birthday, so it was incredibly strange that he hadn't contacted his friends at all. A search began to try and find David on the 13th of May. He was apparently last seen 2 days prior to this. Police began searching in locations that they knew that David may have been. This included the new home that he'd just moved into. He'd recently moved in with a 33-year-old named Joshua Moser. What police found at the property was incredibly concerning. They found forensic evidence including hair and a large amount of blood. Horrifyingly, they also found a box cutter and a saw. There was also bloody clothing in the house. They then widened the search to the local area and tragically found several body parts in bin bags in different locations. Some were in the cemetery and some were in a quarry in Washington Township. It's reported that Joshua allegedly admitted to killing his roommate by strangulation. He's also alleged to have admitted hitting him in the head with a hammer. A motive is currently unknown. Joshua has been charged with criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence.
Terrifying facts about the ocean you will wish you didn't know. The sounds of sperm whales are loud enough to bust your eardrums if you are underwater. Sperm whales hold the record as the loudest mammals on Earth, emitting vocalizations that can reach a remarkable 230 decibels. To put this in perspective, the sound of a jet engine from a distance of 100 feet is around 140 decibels. Human eardrums can rupture at approximately 150 decibels, and exposure to levels between 180 to 200 decibels can be lethal.
Thousands of people claim that this book should never have been banned from the Bible, whilst others claim it should never be opened again. So who's actually right? Well, before I give you my controversial answer, first let's investigate what is the Book of Enoch all about. 365 is how many days there are in a year, and at the end of those days we get a new beginning. Well, so it was with Enoch. He lived 365 years, and then after that he got his new beginning because he was taken up to be with the Lord. And no Christian will ever dispute this fact with you, but the Book of Enoch goes into exceptional detail of what happened once Enoch was taken up. And know this, as I share this information, remember, I'm not sharing this as total fact, I'm just repeating the information from the Book of Enoch. It was an ordinary night, just like any other, when a bright ball of light appeared above Enoch's village. All the villagers were afraid, but Enoch wasn't, and suddenly he found himself being carried up to heaven by an angel called Uriel. Whilst in heaven, the Book of Enoch states that God told Enoch to scribe and to write down all of these important things that he was about to be shown. He was shown the mountains, he saw all the rivers of the world, and then the angel Uriel took Enoch on a tour of the universe. He saw how celestial beings could be transported. He sees the solar system. He sees the lunar cycle. He sees how the length of the Earth's orbital cycle is 365 days. And this is the reason why many people believe that the Book of Enoch must carry a certain weight about it, because most of these scientific discoveries had not yet been found when the book was written in 300 BCE. But hey now, you mustn't forget that there are actually two massive inconsistencies in the Book of Enoch which would actually contradict the Bible. And before I reveal those two things to you, first let's look at what this book is really famous for. In the first book of the Bible, Genesis, we read this: there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. I wonder now, how many of you were around 3 years ago when I made this video about why I believe the Bible teaches that there were these angelic beings, and these angelic beings looked down from heaven and they saw that the women of earth were very beautiful. So they went in and they had relationships with these women, and from these relationships came these children who were part man, part angel, these hybrid beings that were Goliath-like in size. And when the Lord God saw all of these evil ways, he was very angry, and he poured out his judgment, his water, on all of the earth, on everyone except for Noah and his family who sought salvation in the ark. I can hear exactly what you're saying right now. You're saying, Joe, how can this be possible? Didn't Jesus Christ himself say that in heaven we will be like the angels? We will not be given to marriage. You're right. Christ did say that. And one day, in the not so distant future, my plan is to do a deep dive on the subject of giants. So if you want to see that video in a couple of weeks' time, please do make sure you subscribe. But right now, watch this, because the Book of Enoch offers a very detailed account of where giants came from. And I want to hear from you. I want you to listen to this account and you tell me whether you think it's accurate or not. According to the Book of Enoch, God set over the earth certain angels to watch over it, to look after it. Some of these angels were good, but others were bad. And just like the biblical accounts, some of these bad angels, these celestial beings, they were attracted to the women of earth. And so these angels went down and they messed up the DNA of mankind. In fact, the Book of Enoch raises the bar. It says the reason that these angels were attracted to the women is because they had long flowing hair. And some people take this detail and they believe that's what Paul was doing when he was instructing women to cover their hair whilst praying. Personally, I find that very questionable. But here's the big difference. In the Book of Enoch, we are told that the angels had a leader, they had a boss, and he was called Shemi Hazar. And he was a rather sly kind of guy. He said, I am really afraid that you guys will back out of what we've agreed to do, and I will be the only angel who gets in trouble with God. So let's make a deal. Let's all bind an oath that we will do this act. And there, with his persuasive words, he convinced 199 angels to fall from heaven and meet him on Mount Hermon. And that is where they begun searching out their targets to create chaos on the earth. What goes through your mind as I tell you this? That here we have these angelic beings who fell from heaven. They saw that the women were beautiful. They went in, and from these relationships, these women gave birth to these hybrid Goliath-like creatures. And then suddenly we now have giant clans all across the earth who are spreading evil. I wonder what you're thinking about right now. Well, it gets even crazier.
Elon Musk yesterday, they just announced the first ever human to have a Neuralink implant. You hear about this?
Oh, the chip?
Yeah. So there's one successful Neuralink person in the world right now.
Oh,
happened yesterday. But check this out.
Yeah.
They put Neuralink into a calculator. It's like a numerology calculator, and it comes out with a number with all the different letters. This is Elon Musk on Twitter, and he pretty much said the first ever human got Neuralink, right?
Okay.
Now, somebody put Neuralink, the name, into a gematria calculator. It's like a Greek numerology calculator.
Yeah.
Puts it in, and guess what the number is?
What, 7?
No. 666.
Oh, hell.
Neuralink, just like in the Bible, they say people will be implanted with the mark of the beast, which is 666. And since this is happening now, they say eventually everyone or a lot of people will be tempted to do it. Them getting that will be the mark of the beast.
Imagine getting married to a man and then 2 years later he chops you into 200 pieces. In 2021, Nicholas Metzen married Holly Bramley. The pair were from Lincoln in the UK. However, after they got married, the relationship completely broke down. Holly told her family she was really struggling. She said Nicholas was coercive and controlling. He would manipulate her, and Holly's family said he was an evil monster. Massive trigger warning here for animals. Nicholas was known to punish Holly in sickening ways, such as killing their pet puppy by putting it in a washing machine. He left the puppy there for her to find. She'd once even run to a police station with their pet rabbits to try and save them from him. Holly was last seen alive on CCTV on the 17th of March 2023. Shortly after, police were asked to do a welfare check for Holly, so they turned up at the couple's flat. What they found deeply concerned them. They could smell a strong scent of bleach, and they noticed bloodstains in the kitchen, bathroom and bedroom. When they asked Nicholas where his wife was, he joked that she might be hiding under the bed. He then told them that she'd gone off with a mental health support group. That was when something horrific was discovered. A member of the public spotted plastic bags floating in the river Witham. When they were recovered from the water, they found that inside were human remains, including a human hand. They were identified as Holly's remains. Nicholas initially denied having anything to do with Holly's death, but then investigators made some damning discoveries. He'd taken money out of Holly's account and had also Google searched, "What benefits do I get if my wife has died?" and "Can someone haunt me after they die?" He eventually pleaded guilty to her murder and admitted to having cut up her body and kept it in the flat for a week. He then contacted 28-year-old Joshua Hancock to dispose of the body. He paid him to do this. He tried to claim that he was being abused by Holly, and he showed investigators a bite mark on his arm. However, an expert examined the bite mark and stated that it appeared that that bite had occurred while Holly was actually in a headlock. Joshua also pleaded guilty for his part in this horrific crime. Frustratingly, it later transpired that Nicholas actually had numerous convictions against previous partners prior to marrying Holly. He'd been convicted for domestic assault as well as disclosing sexual images and breaching a restraining order. Holly's mum, Annette, spoke in court about how Nicholas had condemned the family to a life sentence of grief. He's actually due to be sentenced today, so I will update you guys in the comments as to what his sentence is.
This right here is my favorite thing, ever. In the history of forever.
Hold on to your butts. I'm about to show you tattoos unlike anything you've ever freaking seen. This is Zunmo, a tattoo artist based out of Seoul, South Korea. He creates these insanely unique tattoos. It's honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It's like a mind-blowing mix of double exposure and 3D. Double exposure is where you layer images, but Zunmo adds a whole new dimension with his shading. It creates multiple levels, sometimes even 4 or 5. They're mesmerizing. South Koreans are seriously pushing the boundaries of tattooing. They're so experimental, and it's incredible what they can achieve with ink on skin. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for tattoo designs, which is mind-blowing. Sure, some people might worry about how these tattoos will look in 10 years. But hey, that's part of the excitement. We're venturing into uncharted territory. What do you think? Are you into this new style? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this video, smash that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to follow me on TikTok for more mind-blowing tattoo content. Thanks.
Responding to Stone 47's comment, can you kill it? Although it would be very difficult to kill the chupacabra, it is possible. If you do encounter a chupacabra, here are the best ways to protect yourself. Water. Chupacabras are deathly afraid of water and cannot swim. While throwing water on a chupacabra would not kill it, it could give you a chance to get away. Sunlight. Chupacabras are vampiristic and would be destroyed if exposed to sunlight. Chupacabras can also be killed by blunt force, whether it be a gun or melee weapon.
Here are some fascinating facts that you didn't know. One of the world's oldest known recipes is for beer. Archaeologists uncovered a 5,000-year-old brewery in China with ancient beer-making toolkits in underground rooms, dating all the way back to 3400 and 2900 BC. The most shoplifted food item in the world is cheese. A surprising 4% of the world's cheese ends up stolen. Retailers consider it a high-risk food. Bees can get drunk on fermented tree sap. Believe it or not, the bees that get drunk on this sap are often attacked by sober bees and even denied access to the hive. The longest time between two twins being born is 90 days. Molly and Benjamin West are fraternal twins who were born in Baltimore, Maryland on January 1st and March 30th, 1996. Molly was 3 months premature, but doctors were able to hold off on Benjamin's birth for 90 days.
This harrowing murder appeared on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Then the police had a breakthrough no one was expecting involving another missing girl. It was June 1996 in Philadelphia. Amy Willard was a well-liked 22-year-old. She played football and lacrosse and was offered a scholarship by George Mason University. Tragically, her life would be cut short in a mystery that gripped the nation. Amy was home for the summer, and on the 19th of June she met up with some friends at Smokey Joe's Tavern. She actually left just before her friends did at around 1:30 a.m. Around half an hour later, her car was discovered abandoned by off-duty paramedics in Maple Township. This was strangely just a couple of miles from her home. The car was still on, with the door open and the radio playing. Who on earth would leave their car like this and just vanish? Then there was a terrifying sight. There was fresh blood on the pavement by the car. Police raced to the scene and forensics started gathering evidence. The blood appeared to indicate that somebody had been on the floor for a period of time. Investigators then discovered damage to the back bumper of the car and also a handprint. There were also tire tracks nearby. The following day, there was another worrying discovery. This time it was Amy's underwear and trainers. Now, it had been raining earlier on that morning, but tellingly the items weren't wet. This indicated that somebody had brought those items back to the scene. That day, police met a man called Andrew Kobach. Now, he was 23 and he had turned up to the scene to tell police he'd witnessed Amy's car that night. Now, police took his details but felt that he was quite suspicious. Shortly after this, another shocking discovery, but this time it was Amy's body. Horrifically, it was small children who were out playing who had discovered her naked body with a crushed skull. Now, police started looking into Andrew, who I just mentioned. He was local and he previously lived right by Smokey Joe's. They found handcuffs and a torch in his car, as well as police equipment. They discovered he'd previously been charged with impersonating police. He got a lawyer at this point and then stopped cooperating, but he still denied any involvement. Now, back to Amy's car. The evidence on the car suggested she may have been carjacked. This was due to that damage on the bumper. Her case remained frustratingly cold and appeared on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries until finally a breakthrough in 1997. It was the 29th of May and a 19-year-old girl rang police. Her name was Patty Jordan and she'd been a victim of a terrifying carjacking. She said she'd been followed after leaving a club. Luckily, she managed to get away and also get the number plate of the vehicle that tried to carjack her. It was identified as the car of Arthur Jerome Bomar Jr. He was actually a convicted murderer. He'd been given life in prison 20 years prior for the murder of Larry Carrier. Arthur had shot Larry dead after an argument over a car parking space. Shockingly, Arthur had been released from prison after just 11 years. In 1990, he was charged with attempted murder of Teresa Thompson after trying to sleep with her. Astonishingly, he was set free, though, after she passed away from a substance overdose. Now, after the second carjacking, police tried to track him down, but he was nowhere to be found. That was until a few days later. A woman rang police to say that a man was trying to break into her apartment, and when police arrived at the scene, it was Arthur. He was arrested, and what police found out next was horrifying. Arthur had on him some car keys, and nearby was a car. When they ran the vehicle through a search, they discovered that it was a stolen car. It belonged to missing 25-year-old Maria Cabuenos. She had vanished 3 months prior. Police also worryingly found dried blood in the vehicle. It ended up being confirmed as Maria's blood. Arthur was now a suspect in both murders. An R kit was done on Amy's body, which proved that Arthur had R'd her body. Then on the 1st of January 1998, Maria's remains were found. Her cause of death was identical to Amy's. Now, during his trial for Amy's murder, his family members testified that he'd actually confessed to them to killing Amy. He was sentenced to death and had a horrific verbal response to Amy's family, which I'm not going to repeat on here. He remains on death row and his appeals have so far been denied. He remains a prime suspect in Maria's death, but he has never been charged.
The Bible told us there are fallen angels on earth. But not just that, the Bible tells us the exact location of these fallen angels. Revelation 9 verse 14 mentions how there are 4 fallen angels chained under the great river Euphrates. This is a real river that begins in Turkey and ends at the Persian Gulf. What's even more terrifying is what the book of Revelation says these fallen angels will do when they're released from this river. The book of Revelation explains how the Euphrates River will dry up when an angel pours out the 6th bowl. 7 angels will be given 7 bowls of God's wrath, each consisting of judgments full of the wrath of God. The Euphrates River will be dried up on the 6th bowl, and these 4 angels that are chained at the bottom will be released and will wipe out 1/3 of mankind, which is equal to about 2 billion people. Shockingly, the Euphrates River is drying as we speak and is estimated to be completely dry by 2040, proving God's word is true. and that this prophecy may be close. This is because
sometimes I'll come across a Latin American horror film that surprises me on a technical standpoint, and La Casa Muda, also known as The Silent House from Uruguay, is one of them. The film follows Laura, who goes into an abandoned house to find any clues on the disappearance of her daughter. Now, what impressed me the most about this film is that it's edited to look like it's a one long shot. It's in the style of the found footage subgenre, and it's set on real time, meaning a minute in real life equals to a minute passing in the film. Now, I feel that like all three of these aspects are pretty difficult to achieve on their own, so adding them all together is pretty ambitious, and I'd say it kind of pays off. I think the biggest issue within the film is that you can really feel the minutes pass by as Laura uncovers the mystery. A lot of this film is following her in this quiet building, but this does allow Laura to take a moment and feel the pain from her sorrow and grief. Also, I have to applaud this film for holding back on the jump scares because it could have easily relied on them, but instead, each setup for the jump scares is held for quite some time. But that also means that this film will test your patience, but it's still an interesting watch. You can currently rent it on Apple TV, and if you're a fan of Latin American cinema, I hope you stick around.
This Manchester teenager was murdered in the most sadistic way possible. I research a lot of true crime cases, and this one made me feel physically sick.
Susan Capper was a teenager living in Moston, Manchester. She never knew her biological dad, and sadly in 1990 her biological mum abandoned her. Susan was put into the care of the local authority. She had been babysat by a woman named Jean Powell since she was 6 years old.
In the year 1992, Suzanne was 16 and Jean was 26. Suzanne started spending a lot of time with Jean, but Jean's house was no place for a young girl. Jean was selling substances and was also involved in selling stolen cars. Jean and the people she hung out with regularly bullied Suzanne, but despite this, she still wanted them to like her. One of the friends in question was Bernadette McNeely. She was a neighbour with 3 children. Now, she ended up moving in with Jean, who also had 3 children.
Bernadette was very temperamental and very often aggressive. On one occasion, she actually threatened to burn down someone's house in an argument. Jean would make Suzanne look after her young children and then accuse her of not doing a good enough job. Soon the bullying against Suzanne would turn physical. Sadly, Suzanne saw her as the family that she never had and didn't feel she had anywhere else to turn.
Jean and Bernadette shared everything, even romantic partners. Jean had a husband who she was separated from called Glyn Powell. However, the two had an odd relationship and would actually frequently see each other still. Bernadette had a 16-year-old boyfriend called Anthony Dudson, despite her being 24. Bizarrely, Anthony was also intimate with Jean. Jean was also intimate with Jeffrey Lee, who would buy substances from her. In November that year, Anthony and Bernadette both got pubic lice. Bernadette blamed Susan for this, and this would set in motion some horrific events. On the 7th of December, the group lured Suzanne to Jean's house.
When she arrived, she was pinned down by Glyn, who shaved her head and her eyebrows. They put a bag over her head and beat her relentlessly. Suzanne was then forced to shave her own pubic hair and was locked in a cupboard overnight. They then moved her to Bernadette's house because her crying was keeping the children awake.
5 days of torture would follow. Suzanne was blindfolded, gagged, burned with cigarettes and injected with substances. They blasted rave music into her ears and forced her to lie in her own urine and feces. She was scrubbed in a bath full of bleach and horrifically had her teeth pulled out with pliers by Jean's brother Clifford. He apparently laughed as he yanked her teeth out.
Shockingly, 18-year-old David Hill came to the house at one point and saw what was going on. Suzanne asked David to please free her, but he said that he couldn't. He would later claim that he was too afraid to set her free. The 6 attackers then got news that Suzanne was going to be reported missing. On the 14th of December, they stuffed Suzanne into the boot of a car and drove her to a remote location in Stockport.
The attackers apparently laughed throughout the car ride. They shoved her down a bank and into a bramble patch. Then they threw petrol on her and set her on fire while singing the song Disco Inferno. The group left her for dead, but Suzanne was still alive. She staggered to find help and was found by a passerby who immediately took her back to their house. As they waited for the ambulance to arrive, they gave her a glass of water, but she was unable to hold it due to her hands basically being ash. A member of the public said her legs looked like raw meat.
When at the hospital, she was able to tell police the names of her attackers before succumbing to her injuries a couple of days later, passing away. She had been burned so badly that she was unrecognisable.
Jean, Glynn and Bernadette were sentenced to life in prison. Jeffrey Lee was given 12 years for false imprisonment. Anthony Dodson was 16 at the time and was found guilty of murder and given 18 years in prison, which was later reduced to 16. Jean's brother Clifford was given 15 years in a young offenders institution.